The first thing the Academy noticed was not her size or her species, or even the gravity warning icon flashing beside her file. It was the way the noise died when she arrived. The transport bay had been loud seconds earlier, metal voices, armored feet, overlapping languages, but as the airlock slid open and she stepped through, the sound thinned out, like a breath held too long. Dozens of cadets turned toward her at once. Tall ones, wide ones, things built from plates and claws and composite bone. Veterans of bloodline academies. Predators raised to dominate. And then there was her. She crossed the deck without urgency, boots landing softly on alloy flooring designed for creatures twice her mass. No escort. No visible weapon. A plain uniform, regulation cut, carrying nothing that suggested threat. Her posture was relaxed, almost indifferent, but there was something unsettling in the rhythm of her movement, measured, economical, as if every step had already been decided long before she took it. Whispers followed her like static. Deathworld origin. Gravity class extreme. Looks breakable. She did not react. Not with her face, not with her pace. She walked as if the entire hangar were empty. At intake, the registrar, a thin-limbed official with glassy eyes, paused longer than usual while reading her file. The silence stretched. Then a card slid across the desk. Solo housing assignment. Observation tier. Provisional status. She accepted it with a nod and moved on. Her room was bare, antiseptic white and humming softly with climate controls tuned for species averages that did not include her. One bunk. One locker. One desk bolted to the floor. She unpacked nothing except a small case, which she secured and placed out of sight. Whatever was inside, she did not look at it long. Training began before dawn. The combat hall was a cathedral of violence. Reinforced walls, kinetic dampeners, scars from generations of sanctioned brutality. The instructor demonstrated techniques with blinding speed, 8 limbs moving in complex patterns meant to overwhelm most nervous systems. She watched without blinking. When sparring pairs were called, bodies shifted and paired off. She remained alone at the edge of the mat. The instructor noticed. Pause. A click of mandibles. Solo drill assignment. The practice construct activated, projecting a humanoid opponent. She stepped forward and moved. Not fast. Not slow. Correct. Every strike landed at the precise angle required to disable. Every block redirected force instead of meeting it. No wasted motion. No flourish. When the sequence ended, the machine powered down and she stepped back to her place. The instructor stared. Others leaned closer. By midday, curiosity had sharpened into something less friendly. In the mess hall, she chose a corner seat, back to the wall, tray untouched. A shadow fell across the table. The largest cadet in the room stood over her, thick-limbed, tusked, encased in ceremonial armor polished to intimidate. He spoke loudly. Laughter answered him. She did not look up. The table shuddered as his fist struck it. The metal warped slightly. Still nothing. Silence, it turned out, angered him more than defiance. He leaned close, breath hot and acidic, savoring the attention of the crowd. He wanted fear. He wanted submission. What he got was a glance. Brief. Level. Unimpressed. Something in his expression faltered. He recovered quickly, scoffing as he turned away, but the moment lingered. Eyes followed her long after he left. The harassment did not stop. It escalated. Markings appeared on her door. Crude images. Threats carved shallow, meant to be seen and laughed at. She never erased them. She walked past as if they were part of the wall. Weapons training followed. Live simulations. She placed every shot where it needed to be. Not where it would look impressive. Where it would end a fight. The instructor asked where she learned such control. She answered with a single phrase and nothing more. By evening, speculation had turned into wagers. She would break. She would run. She would kneel. The tusked cadet made sure everyone heard his promise. A public challenge. An unofficial match. The kind that was technically discouraged and quietly encouraged. The kind where accidents happened. She passed him in the corridor afterward, hands in her pockets, eyes forward. That night, alone in her room, she sat on the floor and slowed her breathing until the hum of the station faded. She did not rehearse techniques. She did not imagine victory. She remembered. Morning came sharp and electric. The combat ring was surrounded. Cadets crowded the barriers. Instructors pretended not to care while choosing optimal vantage points. The tusked cadet paced at the center, energized by attention, armor gleaming under the lights. She waited outside the ring. Not standing. Sitting. Cross-legged on the bench, spine straight, hands resting loosely on her knees. No armor. No visible tension. Some laughed at that. Others grew uneasy without knowing why. The challenge was called. Containment fields rose. Protocols engaged. The signal sounded. He charged. Fast for his size. Trained to overwhelm smaller opponents through mass and intimidation. His opening strike was meant to end things immediately. She did not move. The attack passed close enough to disturb the air near her face. That fraction of a second cost him everything. Her hand rose. Fingers aligned. A precise motion, too subtle for the crowd to follow. A second contact followed, two fingers finding a vulnerable junction where biology met armor. There was a sound. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. The giant collapsed as if gravity had been turned off inside him. The arena froze. Medical systems activated automatically, drones descending as instructors rushed forward. Diagnostics scrolled. Stabilization complete. Survival confirmed. She remained seated. No triumph. No apology. When questioned, she answered calmly. Temporary damage. Calculated. Recovery expected. The footage spread before the hour was over. Silence followed her through the academy afterward, not the awkward kind but the wary kind. The kind reserved for unstable machinery or unexploded ordnance. That night, a sealed message reached the command level. Authorization codes. Earth origin clearance. Trial escalation approved. The next chamber was not a ring. It was a proving ground. Reinforced doors sealed behind her as multiple opponents took their positions, chosen not to win but to endure. Observers leaned forward behind armored glass. Even the cadet she had felled watched from a brace, eyes burning with something that was no longer arrogance. A countdown began. She flexed her fingers once, feeling the weight of the moment settle, not on her shoulders but into her bones. The final tone sounded. And the first attacker moved. The first body hit the floor before most of the observers realized the trial had truly begun. Motion erupted in the chamber, sharp and overlapping, 5 distinct attack patterns converging on a single point. The challengers were not reckless. Each had been selected for discipline, for control under pressure. They moved as a coordinated threat, angles covered, escape routes sealed, weapons humming with lethal restraint. She stepped aside once. It wasn't a dodge so much as a correction, half a pace, a shift of balance that let the lead attacker's momentum betray him. He overextended by a margin too small to register consciously. Her elbow met his center line. A nerve cluster collapsed under precise force. He fell without sound, muscles locked, eyes wide and aware. The second hesitated. That pause was fatal. She closed the distance before the hesitation could resolve into action. A low strike to the knee joint compromised structure, followed by a rotational throw that used the opponent's own mass as leverage. The impact reverberated through the floor. Internal dampeners flared. The challenger did not rise. The remaining 3 adjusted instantly, spreading out, abandoning formation. One launched a stun disc, curving it to force her into the path of the others. She ducked beneath it without looking. Her focus had narrowed, not into tunnel vision but into something colder. An internal map constantly updating, tracking breath patterns, micromovements, weight shifts. She was not reacting. She was executing. The third opponent rushed, heavy and armored, shields raised. She met him head-on. The exchange lasted less than 3 seconds. A strike to the calf destabilized him. A palm drove into the rib cage at the precise moment his exhale began. The force did not break bone, it interrupted rhythm. His counterattack came too late. Her follow-up landed behind the jaw, cutting power without destroying it. He collapsed in a controlled heap, alive, incapacitated. From the observation deck no one spoke. The fourth challenger, a sleek, fast species built for ambush, attempted a flanking maneuver, tailblade snapping forward with lethal intent. She caught it mid-motion, fingers closing around hardened cartilage. The look of shock lasted exactly as long as it took her to twist, redirecting the force back through the attacker's own spine. He screamed once before his legs failed. Only one remained. The last opponent had not moved. She stood at the edge of the chamber, stone-skinned and steady, weapon lowered. Her eyes never left the human. She had seen enough. A single step backward broke the silence. Surrender. The chamber lights dimmed. The containment field powered down. Trial complete. No cheers followed. No release of tension. The air remained heavy as if the room itself had not yet accepted what it had witnessed. She stood among the fallen, breathing even, posture relaxed but alert. Medical drones moved in automatically, stabilizing every body. She watched until the systems confirmed survival across the board. Only then did she turn toward the exit. Command personnel met her outside the chamber. Their expressions varied: calculation, unease, something close to awe, but none spoke at first. Finally, the commander extended a small insignia. Matte black. Unadorned except for a symbol that carried weight across systems. Rank elevation approved. She accepted it without ceremony. By the time she returned to her quarters, the Academy network was in turmoil. Footage from the trial spread faster than moderation protocols could contain it. Analysts slowed it down frame by frame. Instructors argued over doctrine and ethics. Cadets watched in silence, reassessing every assumption they had ever held. She ignored it all. Inside her room, she opened the secured case for the first time since arrival. The cloth inside was dark, edged in red thread worn smooth by time. An emblem once struck from records. She draped it across her shoulders and closed her eyes. For a moment, the Academy disappeared. When she emerged the next morning, the corridors felt different. Not quieter, more cautious. Conversations paused when she passed. No one blocked her path. No one challenged her. Briefings followed. Advanced simulations. Strategic evaluations far beyond her initial placement. Each time she performed with the same measured precision, never more, never less. When asked why she never pushed harder, she answered simply, "Unnecessary force invited unnecessary response." The message from Earth arrived 2 days later. Encrypted. Priority classified. Command staff gathered in a secure chamber as the transmission played. High-level authorization. Deployment consideration. External threat escalation beyond Academy parameters. The room stiffened. She was called in last. The commander studied her for a long moment before speaking. The trials were not meant to accelerate this quickly. Circumstances have changed. She waited. There is an incident beyond the frontier. A coalition outpost went dark. No distress signal. No survivors confirmed. Recon drones failed to return. Pause. They are requesting a human presence. The words carried implication. Not representation. Not diplomacy. Capability. She nodded once. Preparation began immediately. Equipment requisitions tailored to her specifications. Environmental briefings. Threat models updated in real time as new data trickled in, fragmented, inconsistent, troubling. Energy signatures that didn't match known technology. Damage patterns that suggested intent rather than chaos. As the transport was readied, an instructor pulled the commander aside, voice low but urgent. "This is premature. She's effective, but she's still untested in live operations." The commander did not look away from the display. "She has been tested her entire life. We're just the first to notice." The launch bay filled with controlled urgency. She boarded alone. As the doors sealed and the ship disengaged, she settled into the harness, eyes forward. The stars stretched, folding into transit. Somewhere beyond the veil of faster-than-light, something waited, something that had erased a fortified outpost without warning. She did not wonder if she would survive. She wondered what would remain. Midway through transit, alarms flickered. Not external. Internal. A system anomaly rippled through the ship, subtle but wrong. Power fluctuations. Sensor ghosts. The onboard intelligence attempted recalibration and failed. She unstrapped calmly, moving toward the control interface. The voice that answered her was not the ship's. It was distorted, layered, speaking in no known language, and yet, somehow she understood the intent behind it. Recognition. The lights dimmed further. The stars outside the viewport warped, freezing mid-transition. She placed one hand on the console, grounding herself. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, her expression changed. Not fear. Focus. Whatever had erased the outpost had noticed her arrival. And it was already reaching back. The ship screamed without sound as reality peeled back around it. Warning glyphs flared and died before the onboard systems could translate them. The transit corridor collapsed into static, stars smearing into impossible angles, as if the universe itself had been folded by careless hands. Gravity flickered. For a fraction of a second, up and down lost meaning. She remained standing. Her boots locked magnetically to the deck as she braced one hand against the console. The foreign presence pressed harder now, not a voice, not a signal, but a pressure behind thought, testing boundaries, probing reactions. The ship's intelligence attempted to assert control. It failed again. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself in sensation. Wait. Temperature. Pulse. The presence hesitated, as if surprised that its intrusion had been acknowledged without panic. "Identify," she said, not aloud but through the interface directing intent rather than sound. The response was immediate. Images flooded the display without being rendered. Fractured impressions of ruined structures, twisted alloys, organic matter rearranged into unfamiliar geometries. The sensation was not hostile in the way predators were hostile. It was curious, assessing. A hunter that studied before it struck. She adjusted the ship's output manually, isolating systems, narrowing the channel of contact. The pressure intensified briefly, then stabilized as if the entity on the other side had accepted the terms. For a heartbeat, they regarded one another across a gulf of warped physics. Then the presence withdrew. The stars snapped back into alignment. Transit resumed violently, throwing her against the harness as the ship completed its jump prematurely. Alarms blared in earnest now, systems rebooting, diagnostics racing to catch up. She secured herself and waited. Minutes later, the ship dropped into real space near the edge of the affected sector. The outpost should have been visible, an orbital lattice around a mineral-rich moon, bristling with defensive arrays. There was nothing. No debris field. No radiation bloom. Not even residual heat. It was as if the structure had never existed. She initiated a slow scan, expanding sensor range while keeping power signatures minimal. The emptiness felt wrong, too clean. Space did not erase itself this neatly without reason. A flicker appeared at the edge of detection. Then another. Shapes emerged, massive asymmetrical constructs drifting just beyond conventional sensor resolution. They did not move as ships moved. They adjusted their position relative to observation, sliding into angles that defied intuitive geometry. Her console struggled to display them. She did not. She recognized the pattern now. The earlier contact had not been an attack. It had been a greeting. The constructs shifted, forming a loose perimeter around her vessel. No weapons powered. No overt aggression. A display of control rather than threat. She opened a channel deliberately, stripping it down to raw data exchange. "I am here," she transmitted. State intent. The reply came not as words but as sensation, pressure modulated into meaning. They did not recognize species. They recognized function. She was classified. The designation carried weight. She was not prey. Not yet. They had encountered her kind before. Memory fragments surfaced unbidden. Stories buried deep in Earth's restricted archives. References to vanished fleets. Anomalies dismissed as cosmic noise. Encounters written off because no one returned to confirm them. The constructs had learned from those encounters. They were cautious now. A projection formed ahead of her ship, space folding inward to create a focal point. Within it, a shape resolved, smaller than the others, more refined. A representative. It reached out again more carefully this time. Observation concluded, it conveyed. Assessment pending. Prove relevance. She exhaled. The ship's power reserves were insufficient for a prolonged engagement. She was alone, outnumbered, facing an intelligence that operated on principles beyond known physics. Standard protocol would have dictated retreat, data collection, reinforcement. She shut off the protocol. Instead, she powered down her weapons entirely. The constructs reacted instantly, energy patterns shifting, attention sharpening. Vulnerability was unexpected. She rerouted all available power into propulsion and structural integrity, then angled the ship directly toward the projection. The move was calculated, not a charge, not a surrender. A demonstration. The projection adjusted, unfolding further, revealing layers within layers, each movement precise and deliberate. It allowed her approach, monitoring micro-adjustments in trajectory, thrust variance, reaction timing. She flew manually. Every correction was intentional. Every deviation communicated restraint rather than fear. At a predetermined distance, she cut engines. Momentum carried the ship forward in silence. The projection halted her without contact, space itself thickening into resistance. Her vessel rested within an invisible boundary, suspended between motion and stillness. The pressure returned, heavier now. Danger acknowledged, the presence conveyed. Capability unverified. She responded by disengaging the harness and standing. Against every safety regulation, she opened the airlock. The vacuum did not rush in. The boundary held. She stepped forward, crossing the threshold where her ship ended and nothing should have been. The constructs observed closely, energy signatures flaring and stabilizing in rapid cycles. She removed the insignia from her chest and held it out, not as an offering but as context. "I am not command," she transmitted through the boundary, voice steady. "I am response." The projection shifted again. New data flowed, scenes of conflict, of systems stripped bare not for conquest but for study. The constructs were not expanding. They were searching. Testing civilizations against unknown criteria, discarding those that failed without malice. They had not encountered resistance that adapted quickly enough to matter. Until now. She felt the weight of their attention settle fully upon her. Prove relevance, the presence repeated. She considered. Then she did something no model would have predicted. She sat down. Cross-legged, floating within the invisible field, hands resting loosely on her knees. The posture was deliberate, familiar. Non-threatening yet unyielding. The constructs hesitated. She began to slow her breathing, aligning it with the faint oscillation of the boundary around her. Matching rhythm. Matching frequency. Her heartbeat steadied, then synchronized. The field responded. Microvariations smoothed. Resistance softened. Understanding flickered. Not comprehension but recognition of pattern alignment. A biological system capable of conscious synchronization without technological mediation. Interest deepened. She extended one hand, fingers relaxed. The boundary rippled. Contact. Not physical, informational. A bridge formed, fragile but stable. Data flowed both ways now, filtered through shared rhythm rather than force. They tasted her history. Her species' scars. Their capacity for violence and restraint intertwined. They recoiled slightly. This was unexpected. Within the flow she sensed something else, a flaw. A constraint embedded deep within their structure, a limitation they had never needed to confront because no one had pushed them far enough. She withdrew her hand gently. "I can help," she transmitted. "Or I can stop you." The projection withdrew several degrees, a gesture that carried the weight of consideration. Before a response could form, her ship's systems flared. Long-range sensors screamed. Multiple new signatures tore into real space at the edge of the sector. Human warships, weapons hot, protocols overridden. Earth had not waited. The constructs reacted instantly, perimeter tightening, energy spiking. Threat assessment recalculated. She turned slowly toward the incoming fleet. This was the moment everything could break. If the humans fired, the constructs would respond. Not out of anger, but necessity. She opened a wideband channel, overriding command clearance. "Hold your fire," she ordered. "This is not an enemy." Static answered her. Then a voice, tense, authoritative. "You're out of position. Pull back immediately." She did not. Behind her, the constructs began to shift, preparing for outcomes they no longer preferred. She stood between two civilizations, both armed, both afraid. The first shot did not come from either side. It came from panic. A single human frigate on the edge of the formation flared as its fire control systems misinterpreted the rising energy signatures. Automated targeting locked. A warning tone sounded, and before any officer could override it, a kinetic round tore through space. It missed the projection by a fraction of a degree. That fraction was enough. The constructs reacted with terrifying efficiency. Space folded inward as their perimeter tightened, energy patterns shifting from observational resonance to defensive coherence. Not anger. Not retaliation. A response calculated to neutralize a perceived cascade failure. She felt the boundary around her vibrate, the rhythm she had matched moments earlier slipping out of phase. The informational bridge destabilized. This was how it ended. Not with negotiation. Not with understanding. With a mistake no one could take back. She did not shout. She moved. She stepped forward into the thickening field, pushing past the resistance as if wading through invisible surf. Pain flared along her nerves as the boundary fought to maintain integrity around a biological system it was never designed to contain. She ignored it. She reached both hands outward and forced her breathing into a faster cadence. Sharp, deliberate pulses designed to override the oscillation of the field rather than match it. The constructs hesitated. For the first time since their emergence, their response lagged. She seized the moment. "All units," she broadcast across every open channel, human and otherwise, her signal riding the destabilized field like a blade edge. "Power down. No. This is not an engagement. This is a misalignment." The human fleet faltered. Command voices overlapped, confused, urgent. Protocol screamed for action. Targeting reticles hovered, waiting for confirmation that did not come. The constructs shifted again, energy peaking, preparing to isolate the perceived source of instability, her. She changed tactics. She stopped pushing. Instead, she dropped to one knee, palms flat against the invisible surface, and slowed her breathing until it matched her heart again. The pain receded slightly as the field recalibrated around her new posture. Submission, the constructs interpreted. Incorrect. She flooded the informational bridge with memory, not images but sensation. Gravity crushing lungs. Storms tearing cities apart. Heat, cold, radiation, impact. Survival not as theory, but as lived reality repeated across generations. This was not threat. This was context. The constructs absorbed it in silence. Their energy patterns wavered, then stabilized at a lower threshold. The projection reformed, closer now, more defined than before. Relevance reassessed, it conveyed. Behind her, the human fleet powered down weapon systems one by one, officers choosing restraint over instinct as her command filtered through chain-of-command redundancies. The moment stretched. Then the constructs did something unprecedented. They disengaged. The perimeter loosened, energy bleeding off into the void. The projection dimmed, its structure collapsing inward as if folding into itself. The massive shapes drifted back, maintaining distance but no longer pressing. Contact suspended, the presence signaled. Parameters updated. Observation continues. And just like that, the immediate threat was gone. She exhaled, tension draining from muscles she hadn't realized were locked. The boundary released her fully and she staggered, catching herself before drifting. A tractor field from her ship snapped on, pulling her back through the open airlock. The hatch sealed behind her with a hiss that sounded far too loud in the sudden quiet. The bridge erupted in noise. Command voices demanded explanations. Tactical officers spoke over one another. Medical alerts flared, scanning her for damage. She waved them all off and secured herself into the pilot's chair. "Status," she said calmly. "Fleet holding," came the reply, still shaken. "Constructs retreating beyond engagement range. No hostile actions detected." She closed her eyes briefly. This was not victory. It was a pause. Earth Command requested an immediate debrief. She complied, routing a compressed summary of events through encrypted channels. The response came back faster than expected. Authorization granted. Forward envoy designation confirmed. She stared at the message. They were not sending diplomats. They were sending her. The return journey was silent. The constructs remained distant but present, their signatures hovering at the edge of detection like a thought not quite forgotten. She felt their attention linger, not focused on her ship now but on the fleet as a whole. They were learning. Back at the academy, the reaction was divided. Some hailed her restraint as proof of human adaptability. Others whispered that she had crossed a line no one should cross, that allowing direct contact with an unknown intelligence without oversight was reckless. She did not attend the debates. Instead, she was summoned to a chamber buried deep beneath the facility, where walls were layered with shielding and the air carried the faint hum of suppressed energy fields. Waiting inside were figures who rarely gathered in one place: strategic command, scientific oversight, and a handful of individuals whose existence was not acknowledged in any public record. They listened as she spoke. Not with skepticism. With concern. The constructs, she explained, were not conquerors. They were filters. An ancient system designed to evaluate emerging civilizations against criteria no one fully understood. They erased outposts not out of cruelty, but because those outposts failed to register as adaptable threats or meaningful variables. Earth had nearly joined that list. Silence followed. Finally, one of the unseen figures asked the question none of them wanted to voice. "What do they want from us?" She considered. "They don't want submission," she said. "They don't want resources. They want proof." "Proof of what?" She met their gaze. "That we can change faster than they can predict." Plans shifted rapidly after that. Research initiatives accelerated. Defensive doctrines rewritten. Human strategy pivoted away from brute deterrence toward adaptive response. She was placed at the center of it, not as a symbol but as a reference point. Days later, the constructs reached out again. Not near the frontier. Near Earth. The signal was faint, almost polite. A test, not a threat. She was aboard a monitoring station when the alert came. This time she did not hesitate. She opened the channel herself. The presence formed, more refined than before, its structure reflecting data gathered from prior contact. Adaptation observed, it conveyed. Next phase initiated. The station sensors lit up as space around Earth began to ripple, not collapsing, not tearing, but bending as if the planet were being placed inside a vast, unseen lens. She felt the shift in her bones. They were no longer observing humanity from a distance. They were preparing to evaluate it in full. And she realized with sudden clarity that her role was not to stop them. It was to stand in front of her species, and decide what humanity would show them next. And neither truly understood what the other was capable of unleashing. Earth felt different when the lens settled around it. Not visibly at first. Oceans did not rise. Skies did not darken. Cities continued their routines, unaware that space itself had subtly curved, reality reshaped into a measuring instrument wrapped gently, but deliberately, around an entire world. Those who could sense it stopped what they were doing. Astronomers saw stars shift by fractions that made no mathematical sense. Deep space sensors reported echoes where none should exist. Gravity maps twitched like living things. Somewhere beneath it all, an ancient intelligence adjusted parameters with the patience of something that had waited eons for this moment. She stood at the heart of the monitoring station, hands resting on the rail, eyes fixed on a hologram of Earth slowly rotating within translucent bands of distorted space. The evaluation had begun. This was not a test of weapons. Not of fleets. Those had been observed countless times across the galaxy. Civilizations that relied on force alone were predictable. Predictability, she now understood, was failure. The constructs were watching something else. Human response. Within minutes, emergency councils formed. Networks lit up with theories, panic, demands for action. Some commanders called for immediate mobilization, arguing that hesitation would be read as weakness. Others urged restraint, fearing that any aggressive posture would trigger annihilation. She listened to them all. Then she muted the channel. The presence stirred again, closer now, its communication no longer tentative. The informational bridge formed without resistance, space accommodating the connection as if it had always been meant to exist. Evaluation phase active, it conveyed. Demonstrate adaptive coherence. She closed her eyes. They were not asking for a speech. Not a display. They wanted to see how humanity behaved when stripped of certainty, when survival was no longer a problem to be solved with familiar tools. She opened a secure, planet-wide relay. Not a command. An invitation. Across Earth, screens flickered. Not with warnings or orders, but with a simple transmission. Her voice, calm and unhurried, cutting through the noise. There is something watching us, she said. It is not here to destroy us. It is here to understand whether we can understand ourselves. Confusion surged instantly. Millions spoke at once. But she continued, letting the words settle. We have faced extinction before, storms, plagues, our own mistakes. Every time we survived not by being the strongest but by changing. By learning faster than the threat. The constructs listened. She described nothing classified. No tactics. No fear. She spoke of adaptation as identity, of humanity not as conquerors or victims, but as problem solvers shaped by an unforgiving world. Right now, she said, there is no action required. No enemy to fight. If you feel afraid, that's natural. If you feel angry, that too. But do not let instinct decide for you. Observe. Think. Adjust. Silence followed. Then something extraordinary happened. The noise died down. Not everywhere. Not instantly. But enough. Command channels slowed. Markets stabilized. People waited. Scientists shared data instead of guarding it. Military units powered down non-essential systems, holding readiness without escalation. Humanity did not unify, but it synchronized. The constructs reacted. Energy patterns around Earth shifted, the lens recalibrating as if surprised by the emergent behavior. The presence conveyed new data, comparisons drawn against thousands of evaluated civilizations. Anomaly confirmed. Interest deepened. She felt the weight of that attention settle not just on her, but on the planet behind her. Humanity had passed something, but the evaluation was not complete. Next variable required, the presence signaled. Before she could respond, the station trembled. Not violently. Deliberately. A section of space beyond the station folded inward, resolving into a structure unlike the construct's earlier forms. Smaller. Denser. Focused. It hovered just outside the hull, radiating controlled complexity. A node. A probe designed not to observe from afar, but to interact directly. Containment protocols flared automatically. She shut them down. The node extended a filament of distorted space, brushing against the station's shields. Data surged far more than before. This was not passive exchange. This was challenge. Capability demonstration required, the presence conveyed. Individual representatives selected. Her pulse quickened. They were not testing humanity anymore. They were testing her. The node's field intensified, pressing against the station's structure. Not enough to cause damage. Enough to demand response. She understood now. Civilizations that relied solely on leaders failed when those leaders fell. The constructs were evaluating whether humanity's adaptability was centralized or embodied. She stepped forward. Once again she disengaged safety systems and moved toward the airlock. This time there was no hesitation from command. No one tried to stop her. The hatch opened. The node's field enveloped her immediately, lifting her gently from the deck. There was no pain, no vacuum, no sense of exposure, only a profound feeling of being examined down to intention itself. Her memories surfaced without resistance. Childhood under crushing gravity. Training that punished inefficiency. Silence learned as armor. Violence restrained because it had to be. The constructs absorbed it all. Then they pushed back. Not with force, but with possibility. She saw futures branch outward. Humanity adapting too slowly, wiped clean. Humanity overreacting, destroying itself. Humanity changing, fracturing, rebuilding stronger in unfamiliar forms. None were guaranteed. All were plausible. Choice vector identified, the presence conveyed. Influence potential critical. The node tightened its field. She realized what they were offering. Not alliance. Integration. A permanent bridge between humanity and the evaluators. A living interface capable of translating adaptation into understanding at speeds no civilization had managed before. The cost was implicit. She would never be just human again. She steadied her breathing. Earth turned slowly beneath her, luminous and fragile inside its lens. Billions of lives unaware of how close the line truly was. She thought of the academy. Of silence mistaken for weakness. Of restraint misunderstood as mercy. Then she reached out and accepted the connection. The node reacted instantly. Space convulsed as new parameters locked into place. The lens around Earth shimmered, its structure stabilizing into something less invasive, more attuned. Evaluation advanced, the presence conveyed. Subject accepted. She felt it settle into her nervous system. Not control, not override, but alignment. A channel that would never fully close. Back on the station, alarms screamed and then went silent as systems recalibrated around a new constant. Earth was no longer merely observed. It was acknowledged. As the node withdrew, dissolving back into higher dimensional geometry, the constructs began to retreat, not away but outward, repositioning across a broader span of space. They were not leaving. They were making room. She drifted back toward the station, the field releasing her gently. The airlock sealed behind her. Gravity returned. Command channels flooded her senses again, voices overlapping with relief, fear, awe. She ignored them for now. Deep within the connection, something stirred, a new signal, faint but unmistakable. Not from the constructs. From somewhere far beyond the evaluated sectors. Something older. Something that had noticed the shift. She looked up at the stars, feeling the bridge within her hum softly, and understood with sudden certainty that the test humanity had just passed was not the final one. It was an invitation. And whatever was coming next had already begun to answer it.